Good morning, germs of two sexes. This is your ticker guy on the 6th. Yesterday's late afternoon, evening podcast also had the 6th date on it. Why? Because, we got to file them around here in such a way that I can get to the asset data later if I need it. And why would I do that? Well, because the told you so flag is going to get waved. And I've been saying this, I've been waving it a lot lately. It's going to get waved a lot more. Stock market loves us today. Oh boy. Yeah. You want to go back and watch that podcast from yesterday, the numbers one. And then I want you to listen to this, because this speaks directly to the damage, the human damage. We're talking casualties here, death that is being caused, locked into place by the policies we're putting in place right now. Listen to this. This is from an actual professor, folks. This is not just some random Joe Jackwad. I'm going to link his entire interview, and you can listen to the whole thing if you want.
And what do you think are the possible health risks of the policy that we are following now, the shelter in place?
Well, we will see maybe a total of fewer cases. That is possible. However, we will see more cases among the elderly because we have prevented the school children from creating herd immunity. And so in the end, we will see more death because the school children don't die. It's the elderly people who die. We will see more death because of this social distancing.
Okay, so what did you learn from this? Anything at all? Well, yeah, this virus has a rather unique attack profile. Most flus kill old people and young people. This one just seems to kill sick people. It's not so much old people. I know, old tends to correlate with a specific list of comorbidities that New York has identified, but it's not a guarantee. All right, we have a scary number of young diabetics, very fat people who are diabetic, and we have played this social justice warrior game for the last 10 or 20 years. Hey, healthy at any size, eat whatever the hell you want. I don't care if you weigh 400 pounds, you're still beautiful. Da 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 da. It used to be that people kind of gave you the slant eye with that, or someone would call you fat or whatever. And now by God, that's a microaggression. In fact, in some places, there are people who actually argue that you ought to be arrested for saying such a thing. Shaming people into doing better for themselves is a long tradition among the human race, and it has actually produced progress. And think about it. All those people who told us that we were oh my God, we were so terrible for making any kind of a comment about this. Do you realize that a substantial number of those people are going to die unnecessarily? If you hadn't shut us up, maybe some of them would have decided to get the carbs out of their diet and actually lose the weight. They wouldn't be diabetic anymore, and then they wouldn't die. Well, that sucks, right? But who does it suck for the most? Is anybody going to actually stand up and say, oh, by the way, I was wrong, I'm sorry? By the way, we're saying I'm sorry at your funeral. God, think about that, folks. It's crazy. And yet, people at Walmart, yeah. So, I want you to, if you can manage to get enough of your attention in one place for long enough to do it, you should listen to this guy's entire interview. It's edited a little bit, so it took place in a couple places. The traditional studio kind of setting, and then apparently in a cafe over lunch or whatever have you. But you really ought to listen to this, folks, because he's spot on. This guy is essentially saying the same thing I've been saying since this thing began. There's going to be no vaccine in time to matter, and we're very likely to get a second wave of this into the fall. We could stop this to a large degree by dropping it right now. And no, it would not be a disaster if we did. We'd get the very same epidemic curve that we were going to get anyway. Yes, we flattened it a little bit, but you know what? This is another part of the innumeracy of the American people. If you take two areas under a curve, and that's all calculus is calculating the area under a curve. That's what calculus is, folks. If you boil it down to what it amounts to, that's what it is. But even if you don't understand calculus, you understand basic geometry, right? I hope, squares, triangles, spheres, and you get the formulas for how to calculate the area within those spaces, right? And calculus just gives you the tools to be able to do that over arbitrary algebraic equations, basically, That's sort of what it's about, kinda. All right. Anyway, enough of the math wonky stuff. So, but if you have a square and a circle, okay, and both of them have the same area, then you're having two representations of the same thing, basically. All right, the same space. Well, if you have somebody that presents curves to you like Fauci and Birx did with their flatten the curve thing, and the two areas under the curve are not the same, then they're lying. They're lying. That's the end of the discussion. It's over. Come back, And by the way, these people are people that have letters after their name and went to school. Okay? And oh, by the way, you might want to take a look at who has an active medical license and who doesn't among those people that are standing up there on that stage. Yeah, there's a little bit of that. The other thing that I want to touch on today, I'm going to try to keep this brief because, frankly, the people of this country do not pay attention to the video I put up last night, which proves that this social distancing stuff had absolutely nothing to do with the epidemic itself because the rate of transmission had already rolled over. If you want to actually go after an emergent epidemic with a new bug, one that we don't understand well, you have to do vector analysis. And this is something nobody's talking about. Nobody wants to have this conversation with me. I'd love to have this debate with Birx or Fauci or Pence or any of the other people, hell, the Surgeon General, any of the other people on Trump's task force. Anyone that thinks that they can get me, a open debate with any of those guys, I'd love to do it. In fact, I'd love to do it with any epidemiological person. Okay, and it's an open invitation. I'll have that debate with anyone. Right? I can do Skype. Audio at this point because all my nice business clothes are not here in Florida. So we'll stay off the video. Although hey, if you're willing to have me in a collared shirt, all right, we can do that. But I don't see what the point of video is, to tell you the truth. Audio's fine. Here is the issue, though, in general, folks, which is that when you take a look at this, what you're really talking about here, if you're trying to get your hands on something, and this is what made me so angry when AIDS was going around, is that vector analysis is the key to controlling the caseload and the spread of a virus. Now, you will not control the eventual number of people that get it. We need to be really clear that we're not trying to do that. All right, with something like AIDS, if you can cut off the vectors if you can cut off all the vectors, then obviously the infection rate goes to zero. But cutting off all the vectors is usually an impossibility or an improbability. But if you are worried about the rate of acceleration, and that's what we're really talking about with an emergent bug. And again, this is what I pointed out in the video last night, which is that there is no rate of acceleration. At the time that they slammed all these restrictions on, the rate of acceleration had already gone negative. So they were not the reason it happened. It was already happening through natural forces. Whether they're environmental, whether you're just running out of poor bastards to infect in high vector environments, I don't know. I can speculate, but I don't know. But the facts are that the rate of acceleration had already turned negative. And once it does, you're going to be seeing downward pressure on the rate of infections. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to go negative. You're still going to see a growth in infection numbers for a period of time, but the acceleration rate had already turned around. All right. So, again, to go back to the AIDS thing, we knew fairly early on that one of the major vectors for the spread of this disease was the bathhouses in San Francisco. And rather than close them, Dianne Feinstein, who was the mayor at the time, was scared of losing her job because 20% of the voters within the city were gay men. And she knew that if she shut it down, that might cost her the next election. Well, Dianne Feinstein is now a senator. She's never paid for this, but 450,000 Americans were shoved in the hole in no small part as a result of that. Probably half of them would not be dead had she immediately closed that vector off as soon as it was identified as one of the major forces spreading this virus. Okay. We knew the same sort of thing was going on here with COVID-19. Specifically, as soon as Kirkland happened in Seattle, we knew that nursing homes were a primary vector for this disease. We also know that there are other super spread events. We had another one with this choir, okay? But there comes a reasonable set of constraints. Okay, no gatherings over 500 people, whatever. Or maybe we just say, you know what, we have to deal with the fact that among ordinary people that's going to happen. But the thing is that among that choir, a whole bunch of people got infected. A couple died, but for the most part, most of the people got it, survived it, and now they're part of the herd that are immune, which is a good thing, not a bad thing. But when you've got highly vulnerable populations like the residents of nursing homes, and you identify that is a significant vector and is greatly enhancing the R-naught, you need to shut that down right now. There's no or little cost to doing it. Okay, where was that coming from? Well, it was coming from the healthcare workers. It wasn't coming from the individuals within the building that were visiting for the most part. And you can control that too, actually. Okay, you can have those social visits take place where, people are wheeled outside in a wheelchair if necessary, whatever have you. And in the outdoor air, where you've got some UV, there's very little transmission that takes place. This, by the way, we're now seeing. And the evidence is that there really is suppression that's taking place as we put people outside. Oh, wait a minute, we're telling people to stay in their house. Well, the more time people spend in their house, the higher the transmission rate, because how do you actually prevent this thing from being spread among family members? You don't. And then you're going to have to go out and get some groceries or whatever. Oh, oops. Okay? And oh, by the way, they keep that place nicely air-conditioned and everything too, don't they? Yeah, that's a problem. There's no UV inside the building. So we are doing things that are not having a positive impact. We're running the risk of a resurgent link in the fall, which would be a disaster because now the co-infection risk with the seasonal flu is very high, and if that happens, you're going to greatly increase the mortality rate. In addition, in the case of this specific bug, it doesn't appear to bother very young people, school-age children, much at all. It gets them sick, but not badly sick, and you want that to happen because then they are part of the herd that cannot get other people sick. Now, do we get permanent immunity from this virus? When we build antibodies, we don't know that yet. It's too new. We may not. We may find out that the immunity wanes in a year or two, in which case a vaccine is pointless as well. But on the other hand, we just might in fact do that. I don't know. We'll see. All right, we will find out. As time goes on, we'll get that information. But in the meantime, folks, what we're doing right now is just plain old-fashioned stupid. We're crippling our economy. We're putting at risk the very infrastructure that healthcare relies on to survive. Not just components, not just supply chains, but the money that it runs on. And if we damage that severely, you're going to kill an enormous number of people. Folks, 7,700 people a day die in America. 7,700. I know it's terrible that we've had hundreds of people have died in a single day from coronavirus. But we're already getting to the peak here. We're already getting to the peak. All right? I mean, this is just kind of the way it goes. And we have to understand that these viruses do not care about your politics. You cannot prevent people from getting them by respiratory virus by enforcing lockdowns. You can't do it. What you can do is spread it out and make it worse. Well, this has to change, folks. It needs to change now. I understand that Trump, hey, the trumpets, you guys think that Trump got backed into a corner by whoever, you call deep state. I don't care what your explanation is. But if you go where the science leads you, if you go where the numbers lead you, the numbers say that controlling vectors is important. Therefore, we tell those at high risk to shelter in place, and if they want to use an unproven but very promising prophylaxis, that is Plaquenil, okay, hydroxychloroquine. And for everybody else, go back to work. Because by God, we do not want this damn thing coming back in the fall into the middle of the flu season. And it's going to if we don't cut this crap out right now. Not in May, not in June, today.